Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rucha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of First Esdras, the 3rd chapter. Using a different website, I'm using BibleStudyTools.com today because the typical one that I use, I think it's King James Bible Online. I think there may be something wrong with their servers, but I'm not really getting access to it. So this should be a good substitute. But picking up from where we left off in First Esdras, the 2nd chapter, I believe we covered sort of like a rundown of Cyrus coming into power and declaring that we should go back and build the temple, which we went and started. And as we started, eventually Cyrus passed and his son Cambyses II comes into power, at which point the temple is halted, right? The building of the temple is halted. We're basically disallowed from continuing to build all up until the time of Darius. Okay, so First Esdras chapter 3, we're starting off here where Darius is in power, and we're talking about Darius the Persian here. Okay, so if we just look up very briefly, let's maybe start with Cyrus, and you can see in here the succession, right, from Cyrus on down. And if maybe these names you get mixed up with these names because it's a lot of different names. Some of them are not short, some of them include titles and throne names. Something that I find beneficial is to read a little bit about these individuals themselves, and it'll help you remember who they were because you know a little bit about them and it's not just a name. But if we start with Cyrus, we see that after he died, his successor was Cambyses II, which was, as it says, he was the son and successor of Cyrus the Great. So Cambyses, this was the king who, during his reign, the building was halted, right? He gave that order. And when we read about him in First Esdras, the 2nd chapter, he was referred to, at least in the book, as Artaxerxes. But his name in secular history is Cambyses II. His successor was Bardia, which there are, conflicted, there's arguments back and forth. Some argue that Bardia was the actual brother of Cambyses II. Some argue that he was like an impersonator or an imposter that basically came up in there. But nevertheless, those are details you can look into if you're interested. But you had Bardia. I personally would go with the brother one, right? So we'll say that Bardia was the brother of Cambyses. So he reigns after Cambyses. He doesn't reign for long. And after him comes Darius the Great, which there's actually an interesting story about how Darius ended up becoming the king. And when you look this up, this Darius we're reading about was not, he was not the son or the brother of either Cambyses II or Bardia. Okay, he was from, a different a line, so to speak. And let me see if I can find a family tree of, let's see his stats, please. All right, let's see if we can find something. Here we go. Okay, so this is a little helpful. Once I can zoom in. Okay. So hopefully this is visible, but you can see going up the family tree of Darius, right? You have Achaemenes, right, which was the first at the top, and then his son Thyespes. And from here, you can see how the line splits, right? So as far as we're concerned about Cyrus the first, or Cyrus the Great as they call him, this is not the Cyrus that we read about in the book of Daniel or what we just read about here. Okay, that was Cyrus II. This Cyrus the first was his grandfather. And then you had Cambyses the first, which was son of Cyrus. And then you get to Cyrus, the one that we know about. And from him, like we read, you had Cambyses II, who reigned from 530 to 522. And then for a very short period, a matter of months, you had Bardia, or otherwise known as Smerdis, which, like I said, will go with him being the brother. That's why you can see the line drawn this way. He reigned in 522. You also see that Darius the First also reigns in 522, right? Because Smerdis or Bardia reigned for a very short period of time. And you can see the line here. So, I mean, to an extent, Darius is, if this family tree is accurate, still of the royal line, but not, a descendant directly from here. So he basically comes up into power and then continues from his line, right? So that is the Darius that we're dealing with here in First Esdras, the 3rd chapter. And let's see. Let me see if this actually comes up. Let's look up Ascension. All right. Anyway, you can look this up, but like I said, there was an interesting story about. You know what? Let me just read it here since we're already here. So I'm just gonna get to the point here, but basically just skimming around through how Darius came up into power. It says here there are different accounts of the rise of Darius to the throne from both Darius himself and Greek historians. The oldest records report a convoluted sequence of events in which Cambyses II lost his mind, murdered his brother Bardia, and was killed by an infected leg wound. After this, Darius and a group of 6 nobles traveled to Sika Yalvadi to kill an usurper, Gaumata, who had taken the throne by pretending to be Bardia during the true king's absence. It says here, Darius's account written at the Behistun inscription states that Cambyses II killed his own brother, but that this murder was not known among the Iranian people. And then it goes into this usurper who comes up, and then Darius ends up taking him out, so he comes up into power. But as it says here, no member of the Achaemenid family would rise against Gaumata for the safety of their own life. Darius, who had served Cambyses as his lance bearer until the deposed ruler's death, prayed for aid, and in September 522 BC, along with Adonis, Intaphernes, Gobrius, Hydrones, Megabezus, and Aspathanes, killed Gaumata in the fortress of Sika Yalvadi. Let's see. Coming straight to the point. Okay, so it says Herodotus provides a dubious account of Darius's ascension. Several days after Gaumata had been assassinated, Darius and the other 6 nobles discussed the fate of the empire. So if we go back to this tree, what we've read so far tells us this Darius here was the lance bearer of Cambyses II. According to Darius, Cambyses killed his brother, and there was a usurper who basically feigned himself to be Bardia and reigned, which the people didn't know about. Darius, along with some other nobles or other people in certain positions, ended up assassinating this either Bardia or the so-called imposter. That we don't really care about the details of that here. Long story short, now you have a group of people, right? And the kingdom, there's no ruler, so they need to decide who's going to be the ruler here, and that's what we're reading about here. So as Darius and the other 6 nobles discussed the fate of the empire, at first the 7 discussed the form of government. A democratic republic was strongly pushed by Adonis, an oligarchy was pushed by Megabezus, while Darius pushed for a monarchy, and then they go on and on and on. To decide who would become the monarch, 6 of them decided on a test, with Adonis abstaining as he had no interest in being king. They were to gather outside the palace, mounted on their horses at sunrise, and the man whose horse neighed first in recognition of the rising sun would become king. And if you're not sure what that means by neighed, it's when those horses make that kind of sound. It says, according to Herodotus, Darius had a slave, Oberes, who rubbed his hand over the genitals of a mare that Darius's horse favored. All right, so I believe that would be like a female horse. Let's just confirm that. mare. Yep, the female of a horse or other equine animal. So in this case, we'll say it's a horse. So in other words, he had a horse that Darius's horse was really, intrigued by. So this was the plan, right? So it says here, when the six gathered, Oberes placed his hand beside the nostrils of Darius's horse, who became excited at the scent and neighed. This was followed by lightning and thunder, leading the others to dismount and kneel before Darius in recognition of his apparent divine providence. In this account, Darius himself claimed that he achieved the throne not through fraud, but cunning, even erecting a statue of himself mounted on his neighing horse with the inscription, Darius, son of Hystaspes, obtained the sovereignty of Persia by the sagacity of his horse and the ingenious contrivance of Oberes, his groom. So that's basically the context of Darius. And, if you, listen to that, when you hear about Darius, you might remember him a bit more because now there's like some context associated with the name. Nevertheless, let's get into it. So this is first Esdras chapter 3, verse 1. Now when Darius reigned, he made a great feast unto all his subjects, and unto all his household, and unto all the princes of Media and Persia, and to all the governors and captains and lieutenants that were under him, from India unto Ethiopia, of 127 provinces. That is a very, that's a lot, right? If you look up here, let's say Achaemenid, if I'm spelling that right, there you go. And if we look up the images, you can see just how big this empire was, right? So zooming in a little bit, look at how vast this empire is. Let me just let you zoom out just a little bit more. Cool. So this spans, they covered parts of Greece, Europe, they covered the whole of Asia Minor, all the way up onto bordering India in the east, and all the way up into parts of Africa here on the west. Okay, so you can see how huge this empire was. So continuing, it says, and also dealing with the Media, like it says, the princes of Media and Persia. It's known as the Medo-Persian Empire because you had both the Medes and the Persians in the empire. And for a period of time, like in this case, the Persians were, like the ruling class were the Persians, right? But you still had, Medes that were in there, living in the land. Though these are two different nations. Okay, the Persians are Elamites, and the Medes are, they descend from Japheth, right? So, continuing verse 3, and when they had eaten and drunken, and being satisfied were gone home, then Darius the king went into his bedchamber and slept, and soon after awaked. Then 3 young men that were of the guard that kept the king's body spake one to another. So basically his bodyguards, right, his guards that watch. Let every one of us speak a sentence. He that shall overcome, and whose sentence shall seem wiser than the others, unto him shall the king Darius give great gifts and great things in token of victory. So they basically came up with a contest to see who could have the wisest saying, and whoever would win, judged by the king, would be rewarded with these gifts. As to be clothed in purple, to drink in gold, and also when it's, you might wonder, right, because there are other parts or other scriptures that mention being clothed in purple whenever it's like associated with some form of being in a high position. You'll hear being clothed with purple or something along those lines. All right, and that's because that purple was very expensive. That purple typically came from, or really only mainly came from I think it was from Tyre, where there's a special kind of snail. I forget the exact name, but when that snail excretes this certain purple dye, and in order to even get enough to make a garment or dye a garment, you would need to do a lot of labor to smash a lot of those let me look them up here. Tyrrhene purple. Trying to remember the name of the kind of critter it was. So it says Tyrrhene purple, also known as royal purple, imperial purple, or imperial dye, is a reddish purplish natural dye. The name Tyrrhene refers to Tyre, Lebanon, once Phoenicia. It is secreted by several species of predatory sea snails in the family Muricidae. Yeah, that's the one right there. Rock snails originally known by the name murex. In ancient times, extracting this dye involved tens of thousands of snails and substantial labor. And as a result, the dye was highly valued. The color compound is 6 by 6. Yeah, that. So this is why whenever you hear being clothed in purple, it's like, or being arrayed in that purple, it's associated with, being either rewarded or being esteemed, or those that are rich, because they were the ones who could afford this. So that's why it was valued as one of those high gifts. And then you have here, to drink in gold and to sleep upon gold, and a chariot with bridles of gold, and an head tire of fine linen, and a chain about his neck. And he shall sit next to Darius because of his wisdom, and shall be called Darius his cousin. And that Darius his cousin, basically just meaning he's going to be referred to as such because he would have that close relationship with Darius, because of that wisdom. Like today, even in slang, like you call people cuz, right? But they're not your actual cousins. And then everyone wrote his sentence, sealed it, and laid it under King Darius his pillow, and said that when the king is risen, some will give him the writings, and of whose side the king and the 3 princes of Persia shall judge that his sentence is the wisest, to him shall the victory be given, as was appointed. So that was the contest. The first wrote, wine is the strongest. The second wrote, the king is strongest. The third wrote, women are strongest. But above all things, truth beareth away the victory. Now when the king was risen up, they took their writings and delivered them unto him. So he read them. And sending forth, he called all the princes of Persia and Media, and the governors and the captains and the lieutenants and the chief officers. So this is like a major, like a event, It says, and sat him down in the royal seat of judgment, and the writings were read before them. So you had a huge audience here, and they're all listening to see, okay, these are the 3 sayings. Let's see which one is the wisest. And he said, and this is happening, and you may think, oh, this is like, what's the whole point of all this, right? Why did it have to turn into a whole big event from just, his bodyguards writing wise sayings? But remember that the Most High is orchestrating all of this, because at the end of this, at the end of this, there's going to be an outcome that is needed or necessary to further progress in the storyline of prophecy, right? So that's why the Most High had it to where all this was set up in this manner, and we'll find out when we get to the 4th and 5th chapters and so on. So verse 15, and sat him down in the royal seat of judgment, and the writings were read before them. And he said, call the young men, and they shall declare their own sentences. So call them, let them come up, and let them basically, speak on it. So they were called and came in. And he said unto them, declare unto us your mind concerning the writings. Then began the first, who had spoken of the strength of wine. And he said thus, O ye men, how exceeding strong is wine! It causeth all men to err that drink it. And err meaning to like, let's just say when they're inebriated, you don't operate in your right mind. So to commit error. It maketh the mind of the king and of the fatherless child to be all one, of the bondman and of the freeman, of the poor man and of the rich. So he's making the case here that wine is the strongest because regardless of whether you're a king or a fatherless, child, or a slave or a free man, or you're poor or rich, the wine is strong enough to have the same effect on everybody. It basically can put you in this induced state, irregardless of what your status is. Verse 20, it turneth also every thought into jollity and mirth, so that a man remembereth neither sorrow nor debt. Now, if you've seen, or even been in a situation where, you're drinking or you're seeing people drink and they're like either at a bar or just at a get together, you notice that once they get a couple of drinks in them, a lot of what you hear is laughing, right? That mirth, jokes, laughter, and all of that. And if say you're sober and you're just there, you'll hear that sometimes somebody says something and it's not even funny, right? At least on a regular basis in your sober mind, it wouldn't be funny, but for some reason it just becomes the most funny, hilarious thing, in the world, because that is the effect, as at least this servant was explaining, that wine does to everybody, right? Verse 21, so it maketh every heart rich, heart meaning your mind, so that a man remembereth neither king nor governor, and it maketh to speak all things by talents, meaning it puts your mind at such a state that when you're drunk and you're feeling those effects, you don't regard, right, whether the person next to you is the king or the governor or whatnot, and you basically just speak, you say whatever comes out of your mouth, right? That's why he's saying here, it maketh to speak all things by talents, and a talent is a measurement. Okay, I think it ranges somewhere from 70 to 120 pounds or something along those lines. So if you were to say 1 shekel of gold versus 1 talent, that is a large amount if you were saying a talent. So the point he's making here is basically this wine will make you just say everything, without a filter. Verse 22, and when they are in their cups, they forget their love both to friends and brethren, and a little after draw out swords. Meaning, once again, if you take a bar scene, for example, you can have, laughter and all of that. But then again, you can have, as it says here, it's very easy for a fight or something like that to break out because people are not in their right minds. And when they're not in their right minds fully, right, that self-control is basically reduced now from a thick rope to just a thread. So it's very easy for them to forget who they are and wake up the next day and realize, oh shoot, what did I do? That kind of thing. Verse 23, but when they are from the wine, they remember not what they have done. So once that effect wears off, they forget what happened. That's how some people go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and they wake up the next morning with this mean hangover and not remembering what the hell happened the night before. And then they check their phone and see a text from some shorty and realize, whoa, what is she talking about? Yeah, that kind of stuff. Verse 24, O ye men, is not wine the strongest, that enforceth to do thus? And when he had spoken, or when he had so spoken, he held his peace. And that brings us to the end of 1 Esdras, the 3rd chapter. And so, yeah, pretty straightforward, went into the contest that's now being had. And so as we go through the subsequent chapters, we'll cover how it turns out, how it ends up, and what does that actually lead to. Okay, so Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.